Today, Gareth and I will be speaking about tax-free investments and how to utilize it to the most efficient way possible. Gareth, a tax-free investment is a relatively new concept while it's only been legislated in 2015. This makes it a hot topic and everyone wants one. So how do we use this to its best ability? Do you want to elaborate on that?
Thanks, Cherise. I think one of the first almost pitfalls we've seen is that, generally speaking, these have been marketed as tax-free savings accounts, which is what they've been called in the legislation. And I think that the challenge there is a lot of people have approached them like a savings account. I think many of the banks, quite honestly, are guilty of this, is marketing this product. You can earn X amount of interest and you don't have to worry about paying any tax. What a lot of people forget about is the fact that if you're under the age of 65, if you look at the figures, the first 23,800 rands worth of tax, interest rather, that you earn in a tax year is exempt from tax. If you're over 65, that jumps up to 34,500. So if you think about this by way of an example, if you were getting around about a 6% interest rate on your deposit in your tax-free savings account, you'd probably need about 400,000 rand saved in that account before you'd pay a single rand of any tax on that interest, if you're under the age of 65. And if you mentioned earlier, they've been around since 2015. So if you look, we'll get into it just now, but in terms of just contributions to those savings accounts, you wouldn't actually be able to have as much as 400,000 in your account at this stage to even benefit from that tax saving.
Are there other taxes that you would rather try and mitigate instead of the interest tax in this type of investment?
The real value here comes from some of the buried taxes in the other investments that we tend to see. So if you're going to use the likes of a discretionary unit trust, bearing in mind that's outside of your retirement funds, much like what your tax-free savings account would be, the value comes in through saving on the dividend withholding tax. So that's got nothing to do with your personal tax bracket, whether you're paying at 45% or 18%, it's irrelevant. A dividend withholding tax, if you're holding those investments and you're earning dividends, is levied at a flat rate of 20%. Now, if you're sitting in the likes of a tax-free investment, you're exempted from that 20%. Now, if you think about over a long period of time, how that will start to roll in, because if that money is being reinvested, then you're getting the power of compounding, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're holding these things for a long period of time, that really adds a lot of value back in. On top of that is that whether you're making a withdrawal or a switch within the investment itself, the tax-free investment, you're also exempted from the capital gains tax. Now, if you think about primarily, we would invest to get dividends and growth on our shares. So we've discussed the dividends, but if we're getting growth on the shares or the units in the investment, and we're looking to make a withdrawal, we would be liable for capital gains tax there. Now, that's different for every person, but it's quite nice to know that you're not sort of hamstrung making any decisions because you are exempted from that capital gains tax within the tax-free account. So again, it makes them very, very flexible investment vehicles inside the investment itself, but the real value comes from those two in particular, not really from the interest tax saving.
Okay, now that we know how to best utilize this investment, we know with all the pros, there are also cons. Are there any disadvantages or limitations in this product that you would like to highlight?
Yeah, I think we've got to go to the intention of why these things were set up. I think it's to encourage people to save and to invest, but the reality is it can't always just be a free-for-all. So sort of government has kind of said, look, we'll give you the tax exemptions on the growth. However, we can't just kind of put as much as we'd like in. So currently, as we sit right now in the 23-24 tax year, the annual contribution limitation is 36,000 Rand a year or 3,000 Rand a month, whichever way you cut it. If you over-contribute, right, let's say you put 40,000 Rand in, that additional 4,000 Rand is going to be taxed at a flat 40%. Okay, so it's quite punitive if you did make that contribution. So the intention is to keep it at the 36,000 a year. Obviously, we would like to see that being lifted in times to come. It already has been lifted, I think, twice since 2015. And there's also then the lifetime allowance. So that's per year. But within your lifetime, your contributions are limited to 500,000 Rand. Okay, so currently that's going to take about 14 or so years to get there at 36,000, but it doesn't mean that the investment value is all of a sudden capped at 500,000. I think, again, a lot of people make that misconception. So your contributions from your pocket are limited to 500,000.
See, that makes a lot of sense. When you get pros, there's always cons to these investments. And two other elements that I would also like to highlight is that when you withdraw, you can't reinvest that amount. So if you've put in 36,000 and you take out 6,000 in that tax year, you can't put that 6,000 back. You've used your 36,000, even though you've pulled out, you can't reinvest. And that also counts towards the lifetime contribution of 500,000, unless they obviously up that amount, which could happen. And then the second point I would like to raise is opening a tax-free investment in your child's name, because that uses their lifetime contribution to tax-free investments, and it prevents them to make their own growth tax-free. For instance, if you open it and you use it for their tertiary education, at 18 or 21, you would have pulled that out, and now you've used their ability to use that investment vehicle to save over the long term. So, Gareth, I think we can agree that it's a great initiative to use that's been provided to us if used efficiently, and it's a great addition to an investment portfolio, and you need to use all the tax incentives that you can.